So today we're going to be installing the Hackfab Mini-T 2.0 or B late model oval chassis conversion. This is their V2.2. We're also going to be putting in adjustable aluminum motor mount, and then we'll be modifying the shocks with some internal shock limiters. We're going to grab a 1.5. We're going to be removing all 6 of the screws that hold the motor and transmission assembly together. We're then going to be moving to the front. We're going to remove these 2 screws for the servo, these 2 screws. There's 4 screws, 2 hidden under the front end to remove the front clip. So we'll start with the rear. These rear 4 screws are longer, and because we will reuse them, we want to make sure we note those. Okay, the rear end has been removed. We want to make sure we don't lose anything. As I lose everything. I'm going to grab our Hackfab conversion. Move on to this chassis plate. This is your front here. Your rear end will go here. We need, out of the packaging, there's a small transmission spacer for the rear. Right there. Stickers, always important. We can go ahead, and there are 2 screws here that hold the wing on. We're going to go ahead and remove those.
Really tricky holding all this stuff together.
This little spacer will interface with the thicker portion facing the rear of the vehicle. Then we'll add our screws for the waterfall brace. That is the rear assembly completed. Moving on to the front. Already done the electronics for the servo. We're going to come in, we're going to remove the servo with these two screws here. Remove the bumper screws. We're left with just the chassis. Hackfab has included some components that are required for adapting the front end to this. We have two 3D printed spacers, a metal component that will replace our front bumper, help us get the correct kick up, as well as this block to rest on like so. We'll go ahead and get those installed. This plate gets sandwiched in place like so. And we're going to use some of their included hardware to do this. This upper section are two 14mm cap head screws. We use the original hardware in the back, get it lined up where it should be. install our kick-up plate. And this is where these two 2x14mm cap head screws will run through the front. Get them loosely started. That is the front assembly setup. Now when you install this, you'll notice there's a gap underneath our braces, and that is where these 3D printed spacers come into play. We're going to use two 2x10 countersunk screws for each one. Go ahead and get those started. Get them loosely fitted. We can line them up and add the other two 2x10 screws to the rear of that brace. And do the same to the other side. And that is the front and rear end set up. Go ahead and install our servo. This will retain the factory hardware. Get those holes lined up and get that installed. It does come with two positions for the servo to be mounted. If you're using the factory servo and servo mounts, you're going to use the rear mounting holes.
Started. Line the other up. And get that started.
We'll move on to our battery tray setup. Which are two very nice anodized aluminum battery tray. There is a wide range of adjustment for battery setup. So if you're using the factory battery, whether you're using a aftermarket battery such as a ProTech or a Gens Ace, you have plenty of room for adjustment on this tray. It comes with a PureTech Products battery strap, which is awesome. And these will use the included 2x6mm hardware. This is a metal screw going into a metal fixture. Would be a good idea to add some thread locker. Got our thread lock. Just a small amount will do. Thread lock will help ensure that these screws do not come out during the race. We do not want that. Grab a rag, just wipe off any thread lock excess. Now is our battery mount installed. Nice and snug. That's nice. Moving on to our bumpers. Have our rear bumper, our front bumper. Again, really nice, high quality carbon fiber. Almost forgot, we probably should put the screws in for the front, which are the included 2x6 countersunk screws. Again, these are threaded into aluminum, so to keep them from backing out under driving and vibration, we'll add just a small amount of thread lock to each one. Front bumper gets mounted with two 440 by 3/8 countersunk screws. There are these blue screws here. Are they? They are 1.5 though. Nice. Get those started. Or are they SAE? They are SAE. I do not have any SAE hex drivers, so we're going to do a little cheating. We will just use one of our spare bags. And a pair of needle nose pliers. Use the spare bag to grip the nut in between the needle nose, so that way we do not scratch or mar up that beautiful blue anodize. And do the same to the other side. Okay. We can move to the rear now and add our rear bumper. The rear bumper is directional. you'll notice there are countersunk reliefs, and those go to the bottom. One trick to ensure that you don't cross-thread small hardware like this is to press slightly firm onto the bolt, loosen, and you'll feel it click like that, and then you can tighten and ensure you do not cross-thread your hardware. There we have it. Let's add our body mounts. And then the conversion will be done, and we can move on to modification of the shocks and motor mount. We have two shorter body mount posts. Those will go out front. We have two longer body mount posts, and those will go in the rear. Depending on your body, you have different options for where you choose to mount the posts. In this case, we're going to mount on the outside and then probably towards the inside. We'll double check with our body once we get to the front. To help grip the body mount, use a pair of ProTech shock shaft pliers to help me hold the round post while I thread this screw in. Let's go ahead and grab our body, and we'll see where we like the front body mounts to be. And I think we are going to use those front two mounts. But again, you'll want to check with your specific body on how those like to be set up. For this, we're going to use the included button heads. Flip this guy over and get these installed. There we have it. That is a Hackfab conversion to a Losi Mini-B. Very similar process to the Mini-T, of course. These are included body stops for your body mounts. So what you can do is slip these on, get your body where you want it sitting right, and then use the included grub screws to lock these into place. When we come back, we're going to do shocks and motor mount. Now we'll go ahead and get the motor mount installed along with our internal shock limiters. Those are going to be a 4mm. Shocks out of the way, we can remove the two screws holding the gearbox cover in place. There we can see our pinion spur, slipper assembly, motor mount screws. Go ahead and take all this off. The back plate up, if it wants to go. There's a little pin in there. Don't lose that. We'll remove our pinion gear. Go ahead and remove our motor. Now we have 3 screws in total. There's 1 screw here up at the front waterfall mount, and then 2 screws that go straight into the transmission. We're going to go ahead and remove all 3 of those. Motor mount plate just comes. Oh, looks like we got 1 screw here on the back side of the waterfall mount. And that gets your motor plate off. Now we got the motor plate off, I can show you the differences. You can see the Hot Racing has slotted motor mounts and the factory Losi is fixed. So this allows for a few different pinion sizes, but are fixed to those sizes. Having a slotted mount lets you slide the motor further away to put a taller pinion on or spur, and then the alternative, slide it closer for a smaller pinion or smaller spur. Upper screw mounted a little bit loosely so we can make sure everything is lined up where it needs to be. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use the factory hardware to reattach the transmission mount. And lastly, this M2 button screw right at the front of the waterfall mount. And there we have it. That is put back in. Now we'll go ahead and reattach our motor, put our pinion, spur gear, assembly back in. We're going to use the included cap head screws. And they remain 1.5 millimeters. We won't use those. I assume then that it is a brushless model, but the screws that are included with the Hot Racing motor mount are not the right diameter. These are a proper M3 screw. I assume maybe the brushed is a 2 mil. Get that loose to where it slides. Put our keeper pin back in. I'll just put this back on, reverse order the way it came off. Slipper spring and the nut. And I'm just going to tighten it down to where 1 or 2 threads are exposed. We'll double check the slipper engagement before we throw it onto the track. But just for assembly purposes, that's where that is set. Line up our pinion gear to where we'll get maximum teeth engagement on the spur gear. Tighten it down. When setting your slipper gear, you want just a little bit of free play. There are a couple tricks, piece of paper, things like that. Anymore, I primarily go by feel. Just in case it moved on you, double check it after you get the motor mount screws tightened back down. And there's that. We'll go ahead and move to the shocks. So starting with the rear, we contacted Hackfab. They said we should be using we'll start using a 5mm internal spacer in the rear, and we will use a 3mm spacer in the front to start out with. We may adjust that down the road, but as a good starting point, that's where they set us up. This is one of the rear shocks. We're going to go ahead and disassemble this. Lower portion pops out, spring comes off. These shocks are pretty trick. It all disassembles from the bottom right here. So go ahead and keep this pointing up. Carefully remove our shock shaft. Set this upright to where we don't spill our shock fluid everywhere. Move that out of the way. We have 2 E-clips. Wipe this dry. Go ahead and remove the E-clip. Pop that off. We'll take off our second E-clip. Take our Hackfab internal limiters. These are color coded, so we can take a look at the cap. We need 5 mils for the rear, so we're going to use the red limiters. We'll grab 2 of those. Just going to take my paper towel, wipe this down, get some of the extra fuzzies knocked off. There we go. And this will just go right inside of our shock. Now we can go ahead and we can put the lower E-clip in. Put our shock piston back on. These do not appear to be directional, which is great. Makes it nice and easy. Put our upper E-clip back in. And that's it. That sits right there. Allows the shock to move up and down and lets us drop the ride height without changing our shock or geometry. We'll go ahead and grab the manual for the Losi Mini-B. See if there's a bleeding process for these shocks. Okay, very straightforward. Put our shock fluid out with the old. Losi recommends getting it about halfway through the stroke. Before tightening this down. Very smooth. Alright, let's work on the fronts. We shall go ahead and pull the front shocks off. Same process as the rears. Alright, now both screws out. Pull these shocks off. When talking to Hackfab, as we said, I'm going to run the 3mm, which are the green limiters, in the front. One has a little bit of a hang up. I'm just take a M2 screw and push it through. Let it clean up the hole for us. And it is okay that this limiter does not float freely. It just needs to sit right underneath the E-clip. It does not need to move within inside of the shock body. So that one being stiff does not worry me at all. The piston on. Upper E-clip. There we go. Push that to the top. And there we go. And that just limits the down travel by 3mm. Go ahead and empty our shock. Dry it up as best we can. Doesn't need to be perfect. These are brand new shocks, so I'm not worried about any dirt or grime having made its way into the shock. Oh no. That E-clip went flying. See how long that takes to find. 5 minutes. That's how long it took to find. Alright. Fun part's out of the way. Now let's get this limiter slapped in. Again, same kind of thing. It's a little tight. I'm gonna run a M2 screw through it just to stretch it out just a touch. Get it started. And then we'll just gently give her some taps and send this thing home. Really doesn't want to go in there, does it? We got a solution. Take this drill bit, just carefully ream the inside. Clean out the E-clip grooves a little bit. There we go. We're not losing them this time. Our piston. Final E-clip. Of course, I would lose one on the last shock. Thankfully I found it though. Alright. Push that up to the top. And let's put some associated fluid. This is 22.5. It's what the stock vehicle came with. And that's what we're going to start out with. We'll play around with shock fluid once we get it driving. Figure out what we like. And we are working on getting a setup sheet for the product page of the Hackfab late model conversion kit, which will hopefully be on the page soon. Now we can throw the shocks back on, fronts and rears. Alright, we'll get all the nuts put on, we'll clean up the wiring, put it where it's going to live, get our tires slapped on. We can go drive this thing. And that is our Hackfab late model. Let's get the body trimmed and put on, some wheels and tires put on, and let's head out to the track.